everyone, I'm Kana Taku. Today, I want to work on the level 13 about this book about how to write scholarly papers in English. As a matter of fact, I just finished recording the level 12. As soon as I finished recording level 12, I feel like I'm ready to do the level 13. So I just want to do it because the goal of the level 13 is to make an outline. Instead of just immediately writing on the manuscript or copy and pasting from your thesis or dissertation to the manuscript, it's better to make an outline. We don't have to start anything from scratch, but make an outline, make a storyline for the manuscript so that our readers can enjoy reading it and the paper will be more coherent. Or should I say consistent? I'm not sure if the difference between consistent and coherent, but just wanted to make it like consistent from the beginning to the end. So it's nicer to have an outline so that we don't get lost, So let's do it. I don't think it'll take time. So I just wanted to write it. Make an outline. I have two papers that I want to work on. Paper 1 about values. Paper 2 about hikikomori phenomena. So I'll start with the first one. So paper 1 is about values. The primary finding is about the impact of the contents of the personal values as well as within differences. That's the variance that I was working on. And then I want to add the match or mismatch or more like congruence between personal values and then the perceived values of others. So I want to do that. I know the main results. And then if so, I wanted to have introduction, methods, results, and then discussion. Just need like kind of a brief outlines what I'm going to write about for each paragraph. So for the intro, I need the first paragraph to start some kind of like background. Why, background kind of explaining why I believe it's important to take a look at values, personal values. I want to start with the manuscript so that everybody can understand. I don't want to use any jargons, at least for the first paragraph. So for me, no jargon. I also don't want to necessarily start with like literature review immediately, like first paragraph. First paragraph is like introduction. So it is really an introduction of the introduction section, Introduction of the introduction section. That sounds really bad about introduction, but that's just reality, intro of the whole introduction section. So it has to be like easily understandable. I want to write about why I actually personally become interested in the values. Why I really believe, because I want to write about why values should be more studied by using maybe narratives or examples or somebody's quotes or something like that, or my past studies. I just want to use something to kind of explain why values have to be explained more. And then now here comes like, the actual the business starts, which means I got to talk about theoretical background. So even though I can start with the narratives and then why I believe values are important, but of course, there are a lot of studies already done about values. So I need to provide a theoretical background. For example, maybe I can use like Schwartz's theory here. I want to correct spell it. So Schwartz's theory of basic individuals. Theory of basic individual values. So I want to talk about that. Maybe something else. There are a few value theories. So including that, maybe that would be my first paragraph. So I just want to keep it this way. So theoretical background number 1. But there are multiple theories. So maybe theoretical background number 2. I want to introduce and then describe a few more theories that are related to related to values. Maybe explain details. So maybe sort of that one's definitely, this is the only first paragraph. That's okay. But the second paragraph, I may need not just so short theory basic individuals. So according to this theory, values are defined as this way, categorized as this way. I want to explain. Maybe this many, well, I think one paragraph is good enough. And then maybe I'll do the second one. So on top of short theory, this theory adds what? Now explain a little bit more. Like what we know so far based on these theories. Literature. I mean, there are a lot of literature already. The studies have been conducted, so literature suggests. I want to explain the summary of what we already know around here, and then I always like kind of like raising the questions: what is not known around here? You know, I can just say, no question arises then. What if? How within individual differences or discrepancies. It's not necessarily discrepancies, but that may be true because the discrepancies, if we have two conflicting values that are both equally important, then they may have some discrepancies within them. So that's why like within individual differences, discrepancies, or variabilities. That's the one that I've been really interested in. So I'm just gonna add, it's kind of like within individual differences, stableness, discrepancies, or variabilities, whatever the words that I can use. Whatever words I have to choose later. But I'm talking about not just like the levels for each content of values, but I'm talking about within individual, like integral experiences, so to speak. I don't know if that's even in English, but whatever word, yeah, I gotta decide. A question is, how would those ideas have may affect the dependent variables that are already identified? Because in the paragraph 4, literature suggests the. So maybe here I'm going to focus on all studies that look at values as a dependent variable. No? So it could be, for example, attachment, parents' values, educational background. All of these things, personality, all those things may affect values. But then I'm going to add another paragraph talking about how values affect people's attitudes, behaviors, motivation, health, and so on. Because this paragraph should provide rationale why important to look at values. Then we say, because it's already known, then what's not known is additional variables, but still related to values, not just commitment, but within individual, within person variability. No, then furthermore, the congruence, values, the mismatch of values have been shown to So I want to do the literature review here. That way, I have now 3 predictor variables: content of the values within individual variabilities, and then match mismatch. all of them should. And then I want to say little research has been conducted to look at all three aspects of values on the dependent variable. The current study is designed to test the following hypothesis. Then I'm going to say first hypothesis, second hypothesis, then that would be the purposes. So this would be like purposes and hypothesis. Then I'm done. Then in the method section. Now I can use method section is good. It's like participants. This part is usually not time consuming. Participants and procedure. Then measurement. Then data analysis. That's it. And then for the results, usually start with the preliminary analysis, like missing values, outliers, those kind of things. Then report descriptive statistics to just kind of give an overall idea of what data we have, and then testing immediately. Hypothesis 1. So that would be the main hypothesis, and then potentially hypothesis 2, or reporting like the not most important or core findings, but the reporting some kind of like secondary results, if any. I'll do that. And then after that, I'm going to first summarize what this study is about. And then starting like interpretation for each finding by comparing our results with previous studies, as well as comparing our studies. I mean, we have to compare with probably my own hypothesis too, if our hypothesis was supported or not. Interpretation for each finding by stating my hypothesis was supported or not. And by comparing our results with previous studies, make the interpretations, maybe identify some future directions, describe theoretical and clinical merit or implications. And then identify limitations of the study, and then conclusion. I think that's it. So that's kind of an outline that I'm talking about. So this is the first paper. Now I have an outline. Then once I start writing about it, then I will know, okay, so this first paragraph, I'm going to give it a second paragraph. So I think this is almost like a map so that I don't get lost. So that's the first one. What about the second one? Second one is about hikikomori. So I think discussion section, results, and then method section all should be consistent. It's just, intro is the only part that is different. So instead of start with this introduction, so I gotta just think about introduction for the hikikomori. I can start with, for example, the effects of hikikomori, like introduction of what the hikikomori is. Introduction of hikikomori phenomenon. Because because I don't think hikikomori is a Japanese word, so not many people know what hikikomori is about. So maybe start with hikikomori phenomena, like give some definition. Basically, it's like social withdrawal. I explain a little bit, and then I explain why. I mean, I want to talk about, because usually hikikomori itself has, of course, negative connotations before the COVID-19. But because of the social distancing, hikikomori is ironically like socially kind of like expected, because we need to keep social distance at least for a while. So explain maybe like multiple meaning of hikikomori, because I don't want to look at any phenomena only from like one lens. I don't want to assume that's negative. So I'm going to explain multiple meanings of hikikomori, also depending on cultural background. I may even want to start with the impact of COVID-19. And then impact of COVID-19 should be mentioned. Maybe I can mention it maybe like the beginning, but because it is about social distancing. So I'll talk about that. So start with hikikomori, or I want to start with the dependent variable, because that's relatively make the paper crisp. The dependent variable here is I'm thinking about this suicidal ideation, especially because this is one of the major issues that any psychologist probably think about. So one major issue. So I gotta think about maybe like death by suicide. Start with that. Maybe start with death by suicide during COVID. So I want to start with that, and then provide theoretical background. I guess it's really similar to what I have, like outlines that I already provided at the paper one. So because I want to start with some kind of like real life and then give the theoretical background. I think that's probably my pattern, huh? But provide the theoretical background. It's like an interpersonal theory of suicide. So I'll provide the theoretical background and explain what it is. Explain perhaps the importance or critical role of perceived burden and the belongingness, like lack of belongingness. I want to talk about that critical role, like socially burden, and then belongingness. So I want to talk about that, and then do the literature review about these two aspects. So looking at this one as the deep, because there are a lot of studies already in addition to even the third element, capability. So I want to capability, so to speak. So I talk about that, and then explain what we already know about these two aspects. So that's why that should be the literature review. Keep going. And then now I want to use hikikomori as a predictor variable for this thing. So which means I need to, what we really need about these two aspects. When I talk about it, I want to see all the literature review looking at these two aspects as predictor variables. So literature review looking at them as independent variables, because that way now I can use another paragraph, what we already know about these two aspects. Number two, because that's number one, it's the literature review looking at them as an independent variable. Then that should give us a rationale why this research is important, because by looking at the independent variable, the dependent must be, for example, the actual death by suicide or the mental health issues or psychological outcomes, something like that. So that's why by giving them, and then because of that, it is important to look at as dependent variable. That way, I should be able to talk about like parenting, a personality, beliefs, all those things. Then here comes, but under the COVID-19 pandemic, one important factor was the social distancing. I mean, there are already hundreds of studies that use, like, for example, loneliness or isolation. So I use that. I am going to use this one. So like literature review about what we know about loneliness and isolation under COVID-19. And then now I wanted to use this hikikomori phenomenon. These discussions, these arguments should lead me to talk about hikikomori phenomenon. So give some definitions, social withdrawal, explain how this is different from any other construct. And then I wanted to kind of explain multiple meanings of hikikomori. That way it is, important, or it's worth actually studying it, because if it only has like a negative impact, then it's obvious, but I don't want to make it too obvious, because it is still controversial. That's why we want to study for it. So I explain multiple meanings of hikikomori depending on the cultural background. I want to raise a point of controversial aspects of hikikomori. Then I would say the purpose of the current study is to address Then here comes the research questions and hypotheses. Hypotheses that are tested in this study are false. Then I can talk about the hypothesis. After that, it'll be same. It's always kind of same format. So I can start with always participants in the procedure. Yeah. And then the results still probably be the same. Of course, the number of the results would be different, but for this one, I'm thinking about, maybe like mixed ANOVA or regression. So I use that one. And then summarize depending on the results, same idea. Start with the summary of the entire paper. Oops. Start with the summary of the entire manuscript, and then interpret each result, make the theoretical contributions, comparing with the previous studies, identify clinical implications, limitation of the study, conclusions, and then I think that's it. So these are just examples of an outline, but I highly recommend that, whenever you work on the manuscript, just spend like 20 minutes, 30 minutes to make an outline before you actually start working on the manuscript. I hope this helps. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you when I work on the level 14. Bye.